time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Jeanette Anderson, and I am here today with the fascinating and important Nicole Smith. And the reason you're important, Nicole, is because you are, but also because the topic we're talking about is so critical and necessary these days. So I'm really happy you're here so we can have a frank and honest discussion around dementia, dementia prevention, dementia care. How do we deal with the people in our lives who have dementia or Alzheimer's? How do we deal with all of this stuff that is just a part of getting older, or seemingly part of getting older? So I'm glad you're here, and we're going to have some honest conversation around this. Welcome.
Great to be here.
So I'm going to tell you all a little bit about Gail. First of all, of course, the official inside scoop, and then we'll go and find out the more, fun and flamboyant facts. And then we're going to dive into this topic on two fronts. One, how do you take care of yourself with regards to dementia and Alzheimer's prevention, care? What do you need to have in place, etc.? And if you are someone like millions and millions of us who are in a sandwich generation where you're caring for younger people and perhaps older people, or you've got people in your life, your partner, your parents, perhaps others that are suffering from some challenge with regards to dementia and Alzheimer's, there's a whole spectrum there, then you need support as well, and some information about ways to support them, but also to support yourself in that process. So we're going to have this conversation today. So listen up, take notes, let's get rocking here. So Nicole knows firsthand the challenges of balancing caregiving and family life. As a mother of 5 and part of that sandwich generation we were talking about, Nicole has been a primary caregiver for her mother with Alzheimer's, her father and stepmother. In her book, Diagnosis Dementia, Your Guide for Eldercare Planning and Crisis Management, Nicole combines personal stories and practical advice to support those navigating eldercare and dementia care. So very good background and information to give us. And holy cow, taking 5 kids and 3 parents, that's a lot of work. So welcome again, Nicole. Let's find out a little bit about you that we wouldn't guess from reading your website or your bio or whatever. What is something that would surprise people to know about you?
Well, my husband retired a couple of years ago, and we moved to Tucson, Arizona, and this is my 9th state of residence. So I've lived in the Midwest, the South, the East Coast, West Coast, and so it's every phase and stage has been really fun and different, and I've loved exploring all the different areas of the United States.
That's cool. And it's awesome because I meet a lot of Americans who actually don't get around much in America. Certainly don't live in a lot of different places, but don't even travel a lot. I'm one of the few people I've ever met who's been to every state in the US and
Wow.
every province in Canada, including Alaska. And I haven't been to Puerto Rico yet, but all the rest of them, Hawaii and Alaska, and all of the contiguous states I've been to, and in fact, I've lived in a lot of them as well. So even though I'm Canadian, okay, and tell us a little bit about why you care so much about this topic. Obviously, it personally has become part of your life, but why do you care about supporting people who perhaps can't support themselves as much?
Well, I was kind of thrown into caregiving as so many people are. Dementia was not on our radar. I did not see it coming. My parents were active and healthy and engaged, and everything went sideways when they turned 75 roughly. And I just feel compelled because of the pain and effort and struggle that I went through, and I was confounded by it can't be this hard because so many people are dealing with this. Why is it so hard? It can't be that hard. There's got to be resources. And there are, but it's hard to find what you need. It's hard to figure it out. And so in turn, I was like, I'm going to write this book I'm going to write the book that I can't find. And I want to make it easier for other people coming after me
Mm.
because we're all better if we work together. And I enjoy writing, I enjoy speaking, I enjoy sharing. And so I've got kind of a natural skill set built for this and I enjoy it. And so I figured let's do this.
Okay. Well, and let's start off with a little bit of um, information that puts us in context, because I think because there's a lot of, on one hand, there's not a lot of information and resources, and like you said, they can be hard to find. On the other hand, there's a lot of kind of noise about dementia and Alzheimer's, and people may think that it's a lot more pervasive than it is. I saw a statistic that said something like only 2% of the population it gets dementia or Alzheimer's. I don't know if that's accurate because I didn't check the stat source and so forth. But what is the reality of it? Because you're right, there are lots of people dealing with it, but it's not a given for everybody is going to get old and therefore they're going to get dementia. It's not a given at all. So tell us a little bit about the facts around that.
Sure. So the first thing I like to emphasize is dementia is the overall umbrella term for any kind of cognitive impairment. So Alzheimer's is the biggest piece of that, where it's like 70 to 8, around 70% of people with dementia have Alzheimer's. And then there's other things like Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's, vascular dementia, mixed dementia, Wernicke-Korsakoff. There's like 10 common types of dementia and the symptoms and the parts of the brain, aphasia, primary. So there's a lot of different kinds of dementia, and they all fall under that dementia umbrella of cognitive impairment. So and they're named for different things. Some are named for the physician who discovered it. Some are named for what part of the brain they affect and symptoms and things like that. So that's just dementia 101. The other thing I like to tell people is dementia is not a normal part of aging,
Mhm.
but age is the biggest risk factor for dementia. So as people enter their mid 80s,
Mhm.
1/3 of people will probably have some signs of dementia once you're in your 85 age range or above. So if some people say, oh my gosh, dementia runs in my family because all my aunts and uncles and grandparents all died of dementia. But I was like, well, but if they were all in their 90s, late 90s, then it was probably a function of age, not genetics.
Mhm.
Because what more and more of the research is showing is genetics plays a very, very, very small part of the equation. And the majority of the indicators for dementia are everything that we talk about that's good for the brain is good for the body. So, eating right, getting enough sleep, managing stress, lower body weight, exercise, things like that, that we already know we're supposed to do, but it's hard to incorporate those habits into our life.
Right. Okay. So I'm just looking over here at some of the stats, and it shows in 2024, 8.7% of people in Canada over 65 have dementia. And that number may increase as we go along, but that basically 25% of 85 plus have some form. Now, again, that can be on a spectrum, and it could be as much as simply, not processing as well or as quickly as we used to, through to not remembering who people are, but it's not always a devastating situation.
And
Some
it's not always memory either. It could be executive function, it could be speech, it could be balance, it depends on what part of the brain is being affected and what kind of dementia symptoms or flavor you have, could
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, so it's not everyone, it's not inevitable. There are things that we can do to support ourselves. Let's go first to that part. What are some of the things that are really good tips for avoiding getting dementia and Alzheimer's?
Correct. Like I just mentioned, the things that we know we're supposed to do. The leading gerontologist in the world, or geriatrician, I should say, is Bill Thomas, and his number one, two factors that he says are preventative are exercise and socialization. So we are just naturally social creatures, whether we're introverts or extroverts, we definitely thrive on relationships. And whether that's going to networking and happy hours, or it's having friendships and having social groups or book clubs or whatever works for you. But socialization and prevention of loneliness is critical, and also exercise. So you don't have to be a marathon runner if you can walk for 10 minutes. If you can only, due to energy, you can only move your upper body. Move. He's like, whatever you got, whatever you can move, move it. That
Mhm.
is the key. So those are the two things right now in the leading science journals say is exercise and socialization. And for example, my mother, when she started experiencing some cognitive decline, and I was 3,000 miles away, um, and we kind of started to identify something going on, but then the pandemic hit. She refused to be part of our bubble, and her isolation for 15 months definitely accelerated the rate of her decline big
Yeah.
time because she was alone.
Right, exactly. Well, and socialization and community are something that I think we really underestimate the importance of on so many fronts. Mental health, for sure, but and cognitive issues like this, but also just our functionality as we get older. One of the things is that we are living a lot longer, so this becomes more prevalent. It used to be we retired at 65 and died at 75, and so it wasn't as big an issue because people weren't living to 100. Now there's literally millions of people over 100 years old around the world, and people being born now are supposed to be living to 130. So that really means that like 65 is middle age, folks. We better get with the program and start adjusting our thinking around how long we need to take care of ourselves
Mhm.
financially, physically, emotionally, mentally. And a huge part of that is community, which is why I'm so passionate about the Maturepreneur world and the network and making sure that we get people creating businesses, side hustles, things that keep them vital and active and contributing and connected. Super important. So I'm glad you mentioned all that. I just had to put in that little plug on that note. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what are some of the practical things we need to plan for beyond just taking care of ourselves. What are some things that just like you would potentially have a will, what are some of the practical things that we should probably take care of in advance?
Absolutely. Well, there's several different key areas. You've got the legal, you've got the medical, and you've got the financial. So most people know that you're supposed to create a will. And basically, what I've learned is a will is just your stuff. So it's, yes, you maybe have an heirloom or some special things you want to hand down. And you want to make sure those go to who you want them to go to. But the most important thing for all these things is to start having those conversations, have an evaluation process, or think about it and share it and talk about it. So you need to have powers of attorney, whether it's medical or financial or both. And then there's other things called the physician order for life sustaining treatment. There's you have to have a healthcare advocate. Like there's all these forms and decisions and thought process because people say, well, yeah, if I fall into a coma, and then you could just decide whether to pull the plug. It is just it's not that simple. I mean, healthcare is so vast, and everything can go wrong with chronic disease to acute disease. So you need to pay attention to your own health and communicate with others. And even if you create a trust, like some states require a trust to protect your assets, some states don't. Every state in the US is totally different. But then you have to put the assets in the trust. But then if you've got financial documents, you have to set up a beneficiary designation, a payable on death, bank accounts, checking accounts, electronic accounts. Like it is vast. And I listened to your discussion with the attorney buried,
No,
whatever, buried in work.
we
I
didn't
listened.
work. Yeah, Adam Zuckerman. I was just thinking of that while you were talking.
Yeah, no, so he talks about a lot of that. So yeah, he's got a system for attacking that. And then there's the knock box, the NOK, next of kin box, which you can order. So there's different tools that you can use. In my book, it talks about the legal, the medical, the financial, websites, books, movies, resources. So I mean, depending on how you want to approach it. But the number one way to start approaching it is have the conversation and get the powers of attorney for medical and financial. That's where I tell people to start. If for yourself, your parents, and your kids over 18.
Yeah. And let's face it, no one likes talking about this. No one likes dealing with it. It feels like something, "Ugh, I'm so busy right now. I'll get to it later when it's going to matter." The fact is that almost never happens. And so doing it now really matters because, like, my mother did not have that kind of stuff done. I didn't know to do that with her. And so when she got dementia, she needed a lot of care and a lot of decisions made, and it was challenging because it wasn't official. People, because I was a fierce advocate for her, I cut through some of the resistance. But if you do not have a health advocate, frankly, you're screwed. Like, my mother would have lost her legs if she hadn't had me coordinating between the five different healthcare services, in-home doctors, hospital, et cetera, because they were doing contraindicated things. And if she hadn't had me oversighting that, she literally would have had both legs amputated, and she probably would have ended up dying from that. But she didn't need it. But if you don't have a health advocate, you want to get one. And so be really nice to your kids or whoever
And
is
you want someone who's tough, like
there.
who's like we are, like, not afraid to confront the doctor and confront the nurse and confront the decision and ask the questions because it's intimidating. The healthcare system is intimidating.
Yeah. Well, and we have this thing in our society where we kind of consider them what my friend Gwen used to call M deities. Like, what they say is, from down from on high. They have an opinion, it's an educated opinion, but medicine, just like everything else, is an art, and there are multiple ways of looking at things. And in context, there is more than one answer always. And so find the more than one answer so that you're making informed decisions. Now, I know that you may be hearing a lot of finger wagging in this, and that you should and you should and you should. And
You
from
should.
those of us who've been on the other side of dealing with it, oh, please do, because it is so challenging to go through that whole process where you're dealing with the deep emotional loss of the person that you've known your whole life, and they're not who they were.
Mhm.
They're going through the emotional challenges of knowing that something's not right to some degree, and being really frustrated and angry and so forth. And there's a lot going on that you really don't have to be dealing with, trying to sort out, DNRs and things like that. So,
Yeah, and I like to tell people, I heard it from another woman that was at a conference, and she said, you typically, if you get married, typically you spend 18 months planning for your wedding, maybe, right? And if you have a baby, it's a 9-month gestation period. And typically you have 9 minutes when you get the call to become a caregiver. 9 minutes. And you're trying to learn these new, I call them like learning three new languages simultaneously under duress. You learn the financial terms, the legal terms, the medical terms, and then your person is suffering, and you have to make these decisions. Where are they going to go? Which rehab, which hospice, which skilled nursing, where are they going to move? What are they going to, going back home? Like, you don't, I mean, it's a lot.
it's a lot, and it upends your life. When my
Yes.
mother started to decline and had, medical issues and so forth, it took a week, a month for doctor's appointments and various different things. Being self-employed, having my own business, that's 25% hit to my income. So how do you deal with that? Because well, I didn't have to do that, but I would have had to pay someone to do it, or I would have chosen to pay someone to do it. And again, they would not have been as good of an advocate. And so I felt like I chose to do that, but it had impact and it had, consequences. So you got to plan for that.
Yeah,
So
and people that are really wealthy can usually pay private pay, which is you can do it. And then people that are really, really poor in the US can qualify for Medicaid, which you become a ward of the state. And it's a whole, you have to spend down your assets. It's a whole legal thing that you have to go through. But the people in the middle class, I mean, it's really tough because you've got lost wages, you're trying to navigate. And I'm just at the very tail end of selecting the Medicare plan for my mom again. And that is a nightmare. Like all the phone calls, and she's healthy. But I mean, just the Medicare selection this year has I've already spent like 40 hours on it minimum.
yeah. Yep. Okay, before we depress the shit out of everybody, let's talk about some of the upside of this. So, what has been some of the blessings in your journey for you of dealing with people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and what what, if anything, has been something out of that that's really touched you, been a blessing, been of service?
Well, the one thing I'll say is, so my mom, I'm gonna cry. My mom's older sister. So there's four sisters in the family. The oldest one has vascular dementia. The number two just passed away from physical issues, falling and a brain bleed. Number three, is my aunt, who's been a nurse for 50 years, and then my mom, who and she's fine, but my mom also obviously has Alzheimer's. But when we were going through all of this, my nurse Aunt Nancy, my mom's older sister, was very helpful. Like we were the tag team figuring all this out. And I have a sister, I have five stepsisters, but my aunt was the one who worked with me to figure all this out. And we became very, very close through that. We are still so close. Like we're a big Irish Catholic happy family, but that's dispersed all throughout the US. But this cemented our relationship, and it was, we were just so grateful to have each other, because if you can't do it alone, and just having someone who understood, someone I could call, some I could bounce things off of, someone to help. It was so. And then my stepsisters and then different people helped occasionally when they could, but my aunt is my rock, through all of this. So thank God for her. And so that has been a blessing that we have an additional relationship through that.
Beautiful.
Um, and the other thing is my dad, I don't know, 6 years ago, he fell and had to have shoulder surgery. And again, I'm close to my family, but my parents, my dad lived 1,000 miles away, my mom 3,000 miles away. So we would talk every couple weeks. We'd ever talk occasionally, but after he came out of anesthesia and I talked to him, I was just devastated about how out of it he sounded, and I was terrified that I was going to lose him. And it was a wake up call for me. So now I talk to him at least every day or every other day, and
Mm.
I'm flying out there because my stepmom was diagnosed with aphasia, and then my dad had normal pressure hydrocephalus surgery, but he's doing well. But I mean, just that, you don't appreciate people until until something happens. And so I'm closer to everyone now because of this, because of so
Yeah. Yeah. So it brings you closer to people. And I know for me with my mom, um, as hard as it was for both of us, it also was an area of more love between us because I had to do more for her and with her, and she had to rely on me more. And so it created a different kind of tenderness. That was, yeah.
yeah. Well, once we got mom's meds managed, because she was fighting us tooth and nail, like everything. I mean, she was a feisty person before, but it was the denial, the paranoia, like all these normal things, and then notice the no, which I can't even say. But now, she's very sweet, and she's in memory care. Like all my parents are still living. I'm still whack-a-moling this every day, all the time. And but she's always very sweet, and oh, I'm so lucky to have a daughter like you. And I'm like, yeah, like, but it's fine.
Okay.
Oh,
Next time she says that, my unsolicited advice is to say, yes, you are, and thank you very much. I love you too.
no, I'm there 4 times a week. I'm always there. I'm always hanging out. She likes to see a familiar face, which
Yeah.
is nice. So yeah.
Well, and don't brush off the love because whenever you can get it, you want to take it because there's not going to be there at times. So,
Just
uh,
because my kids are at the age where I'm an idiot. Everything I do is I'm an
yeah.
idiot. So
Great. So take it where you can get it over there.
yeah.
So one of the things that I also heard there is that you've developed a whole new area of competence. Like you can rattle off those medical terms like nobody's business, probably better than a lot of doctors. But there is something that when we become resourceful in a new way, or when we develop another competency, it makes us stronger. It makes us feel stronger, more resilient, more able to deal with things. And I know for sure, based on having navigated through the legal and financial maze with my mother, I feel more convicted about being my own advocate, and would not have been perhaps as fierce an advocate for myself medically and otherwise had I not gone through that. So that also developed some resilience within me and some capacity within me that I wouldn't have had, as well. So there are blessings in this, and it creates strength, it creates connection, it can create tremendous depth of love. it's, how we do anything, it's how we do everything. So it depends on where you go with it. And if you're, a victim of it, or if you get resourceful about it. So what would you say in terms of, we'll shift now to taking care of those with dementia. What are some of the big mistakes that a lot of people make when it comes to um, watching out for the signs? Let's start with the initial stages. So what do we need to be looking for to see whether or not someone's going in that direction?
Sure, and we missed the signs because the dementia was not on our radar. I didn't don't think about it. It was anyway. So, it there's some common things about dementia, but it's also very individual. So the people that are going to notice the changes before not a doctor will are what's not normal for that person. So is it they got lost coming home, or they're doing things that aren't normal behavior for them, or they're withdrawing from things. Like they might have, my mom withdrew from mahjong, so she was playing mahjong with the neighbors, and then she just said, oh, I'm not playing anymore. And she was never a big game person, but she was retired now, and so we just thought, oh well, she tried it and she didn't like it. But no, she, when I talked to the neighbors later, she was having trouble with the rules. She couldn't figure it out, she couldn't follow, and so she was embarrassed, and so she just started withdrawing. So she was becoming more isolated because she was embarrassed and didn't want to have to hold it together. But
Yeah.
boy, could she hold it together when we went to the doctor and the neurologist. Like even when she was in the psych ward being evaluated, and I had letters and I had documents and everything, that the psychiatrist is like, your mother's fine. There's nothing wrong with your mother. Oh, on again, advocacy, like we had to beat them over the head with all these are the examples. This is what she did. She fell, she drove, she crashed, I mean, you have to start gathering all this information. Anything that seems a little weird, write it down and date it and document it because you're going to need it. So
Yeah.
that's what we started doing because we just, I called them that's weird moments. Like she would say something or do something. I'm like, well, that's weird. But I'm like, whatever. So, but in the hindsight, it was like, oh, all the signs were there for her. And, my stepmom, I wasn't as close. I think she was the opposite, is where she noticed, she just like gave up her keys, and it's like, oh, and she noticed she wasn't as sharp at work and different things. And so she kind of self checked and said, okay, I'm not going to do these things anymore. So she was a little bit more open about it, about discontinuing things that were dangerous. But again, part of that's personality. So because my mom was having none of it, she still wanted to drive and do, I mean, it was horrible.
And so when that happens, because that is one of the issues, is we don't really know how to have the conversation. What would you advocate in terms of how do people approach this? How do you approach a loved one who you think is showing signs of cognitive decline? What do you try and get them to do first?
Well, if they're like my mom and they have the standard denial, accusation, paranoia, and so they're not going to have the conversation. Their way is their way or the highway, and they're right and you're wrong, and you're never gonna, because they're not rational anymore. There's no way. So you have to work with professionals. I had to work with my aunt. I had to hire an elder law attorney. I had to talk to her financial advisor. I had to. You might have to go to guardianship. You have to figure out what tools can you use to get that person in a safe place. And so it's building a team of experts, talking to other people, because there was no way my mom was going to be like, oh yeah, you're right, I have dementia, let me go into memory care. No way.
Right.
No way. So it took a lot of effort and a lot of scheming and planning, and yeah, it was crazy. And then my stepmom, like when all this went down with my mom, I called my dad and my stepmom and realized they had no wills, no trust, they had no financial documents in place whatsoever. And so I called, I hired my own attorney, went there, met there in that state. And then also I called my stepmother's brother to have him come in and kind of advocate for her, because my parents they never had any kids together, my dad and my stepmom, but I knew he would want to be engaged in whatever kind of decisions we made. So
Right.
I pulled in all the people that I
Okay.
needed.
So one of the things, like if you're not at that stage already, one of the things that I did, for instance, with my mom, is went into a doctor's appointment with her and asked him for what is called here the orange test. I'm not sure what it's called there, but it's basically a way to track where you're at with your cognitive capabilities. And then you have a measure that you can go back like a year later and see how they do on the test. And so I actually, for myself, next time I go to my doctor's, I'm going to ask for that because I'm noticing little things here and there. And, it's not, there's a lot of ageism that says, oh, you're going to have seniors moments. Well, guess what? Teenagers have seniors moments. We don't call them teens moments when they forget where the keys are. We just think they forgot where the keys are, right? So we need to watch the ageism and the assumptions as well. But having that baseline test, which can just be part of a normal checkup, right, is a nice simple way to ease them into, and then you have something that you can measure where they're at. And it's like a memory, simple cognitive memory test where you they give you a bunch of questions, and then you're measured against that each time you go in or whenever you go in. Do that for yourself, do that with your parents. It gives you an objective way to start to get a sense of where things are at.
Yeah, there's the Montreal test, there's the mini mental self-examination. There's a whole flavor of them or whole set of them that certain physicians use. I don't know what the orange test is, but makes it yeah, but establishing a baseline as a at a annual checkup or preventive appointment is certainly worth doing. But the other thing, I don't know about Canada, but a lot of primary care physicians don't know much about dementia. Like maybe
Yeah,
they can administer the test, but they'll be like, "Oh no, you're fine, she's fine. I can do a referral, but you really don't need one." And so again, advocacy comes in place, and it's usually what they're calling now. There's a physician that started a whole company advocating to have an observer. So I mean, because I was the one sitting behind my mom going yes, no, to the way she was answering all the questions. So you need an observer, someone that knows that person well to give like the real answer.
yeah.
And so I mean it's again it's navigating a system, but yeah, you can get a baseline going to compare from too.
And I think it's really super important to kind of go over onto the other side of the table with them, in terms of the conversations. And, for me, because I had stuff with my mom, I was sometimes not as compassionate as I could have been, and it saw a lot of her behavior through the lens of the past versus she's being difficult versus she's having difficulty, and it was easy to paint it with that brush until I paused and kind of sat down and had a conversation with her about how are you really, like, how are you feeling, how, are you scared about anything, what's scaring you right now, and being really willing to listen without needing to fix it, because as soon as you get into fixing mode, then you're not really listening and being with them, right? And so I think that's a really important conversation to have as well. And just real practicalities about, I think we kind of suck about talking to our kids about sex, and we suck at talking to our parents around death, right? And so
Well, they say people would rather talk about sex than death.
yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and by the way, you should be talking to your parents about sex as well, because the seniors' homes are a hotbed of sexuality because they lose a lot of inhibitions. They have a high don't care so what factor, which is why they are hotbeds of the fastest growing rate of STDs in North America are in seniors' homes. So have a conversation with your parents about sex too.
Yeah, but if they have dementia, there's really, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a
Oh,
whole, it's a whole other branch of
yeah.
discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so and we did mention financial, and part of why this is so difficult is because it is emotionally laden. There are financial implications. So bring in, a mediator or conversation, and that mediator might be like an aunt or someone who can help you and them connect versus clash. And you mentioned earlier Adam Zuckerman's site, Buried in Work, great resources on there. And a couple of things that I thought were really brilliant is there's two card games. One, and they're just like kind of like flashcards. And one is to really get to know them better and to capture some of those memories. So it's like, tell me a story about your first day at school, or tell me a story about when you met your husband, or tell me, and so you get to find out those things that you never know about your parents unless you ask them those questions, right? Sometimes that's just not shared. And then the other one is a practical one about, do you have a will? Where is it? What are your wishes when it comes to, extraordinary intervention? It's all those practical questions as well. So it gives you a really practical way to have those conversations. So
Yeah, I mean, you can't figure all this out in an hour call or on a Zoom call or at Thanksgiving or what. I mean, it's a series of conversations, and so that's what it took me a year and a half to get my dad to do as well, and his directives and everything, because it was, first of all, I just lambasted him because I was going through everything with my mom, and then I just kind of I did everything that I could from my end and let him digest it and work through it on his own time, but I was the initiator. But so it takes a lot of time, a lot of conversation, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding. It's not something you can, get done and check it off your list.
right. Well, and it also takes a lot of heart. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of care and self-care as well. So the, last thing I want to just kind of touch on here is there are a lot of resources for caregivers, but again, unless you look and take advantage of them, it doesn't help you. I've got a good friend whose mom had dementia. She's been very involved in something called Memory Plus that's about supporting caregivers and the people with dementia and have them come together and have conversations and so forth. There's resources available, and you absolutely need to put your own oxygen mask on first. So talk about, for you, what was the biggest struggle for you in terms of taking care of yourself during all of that?
Well, I exercise has always been my sound my savior. So I was never a big athlete or anything, but I've always made time for regular exercise. Like 5 days a week, I'm doing 30 minutes of exercise no matter what. I definitely protect my sleep. I get good sleep. So exercise is definitely number one for me. The other thing that I found when I was going through this with my mom is daughterhood.org. So daughterhood was started about 15 years ago in DC, by a woman, and she's in the industry, but it's a support circle network of, the tagline is, you had your childhood friends, you had your motherhood friends, and now you have your daughterhood friends. But it is open to spouses and men and anybody involved in caregiving. And they're called circles. So there's two kinds of circles. One is a connection circle, and I lead one of those once a month with another daughterhood person. And those are just for people to log on and share or cry or vent or ask each other for advice. And they're just kind of open. And then there's another type of circle that we do called a topic circle, where we'll focus on grief or boundaries or relationships or caregiving 101 or hospitals or social workers. So those are topic specific, where you get to talk to an expert, or it's all focused on one topic. So those are offered for free through daughterhood.org all month long, every month. And you just go inside, and they're on Zoom. And every time that we're on these calls, some people say, oh, I heard about it a year ago, and I didn't want to add another thing to my schedule. And I'm so exhausted already, but I'm so glad I showed up, because you're with people that understand, you're not alone. People start helping each other. And then again, they feel empowered. Like, instead of being overrun with health, with us, decisions and healthcare and caregiving, they're like, oh, well, I can help the next person who's dealing with this, because I've been there and now I can offer my support. So
Right.
they're incredible. The
Uh,
daughterhood circles.
I love that resource. I think that's a great practical tip. And there are local communities and groups that you can reach out to and find that are good for both you, the caregiver, and also for your loved ones. In most major centers, not all, but most places you can find that. Take advantage of it, as much for you as for them, because as much as they become isolated, we also get isolated in our pain and our challenge and think that, no one else gets this or is going through this. And frankly, it's also an issue of this is taking so much time. Plus, I have my life and all of the stuff there. I don't have time to go take care of me. And we put that at the bottom of the list, when really, in reality, it's got to be at the top, or you won't have time for your life. and for taking care of all these people, because you'll be sick, you'll be depleted, you'll be
Yeah,
depressed.
well, the other quote I love is that if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you, so just and I like I said, growing having 5 kids and they were all little, I always made time for exercise, whether throwing them in the stroller or when my husband got home, I would go for a quick run, or I always worked it into my schedule however I could because I made it a number one priority.
Awesome. All right. So tell people about your book and how they can find out more about you and get your resources and your support.
Sure. So yeah, it's called Diagnosed Dementia, Your Guide for Elder Care Planning and Crisis Management. So when I was going through all this with my mom, I just started documenting. I was looking for a book that would help me. And they have the 36-hour day and all these different books, but they were either too thick or too big or too comprehensive. And so I broke it down into the legal, the medical, the financial, the practical, and I used everybody learns differently. So it's got resources for books, for movies, for podcasts, for government agencies, for support network. So I broke it all down. It's very you can fit it in your purse. You can look it up by section if you're at the doctor's office. And I just wanted to make kind of like a catch-all small book you can put in your purse and just attack whatever section you need to. It talks about for prevention, like pay attention to the mail, to the cooking, to what's in the refrigerator, to the finances. So those are the areas that you can kind of start to look at to see if like, oh, hey, well, why are all these bills piling up? Or oh, I noticed that the microwave has like a burn spot in it, or there's a pot on, there's so many little indicators, but you have to kind of be looking for them and be paying attention.
Mhm.
Otherwise, like us, you'll just miss them. They'll.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming they can get that on Amazon or from
Yeah. So
your,
my website is njsmithbooks.com, njsmithbooks.com. And it's all you can get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, on Kindle. And then also since I do read a lot, I've read over 50 Alzheimer's books and dementia books. On Instagram, I'm at Dementia Book Review. So I review all kinds of books that I'm reading, whether it's the Montessori approach to dementia or caregiving for dementia, or Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal, or pharmacology books. I mean, I read literally everything on death and dying and dementia and every aspect of it.
oh my goodness. So the kind of the silver lining and the blessing in this is you've developed and become an expert in an area where there needs to be more experts, where you can really provide support to the public and really make a big difference in terms of the legacy that you're leaving beyond the caring for the people that you're caring for, which is really valuable and wonderful anyways. But now you can touch thousands and thousands of people through that, where you've taken this in terms of turning that lemon into lemonade. So
Right. And I tell people when I said I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a social worker, I am a daughter. I am the dementia daughter, living, breathing this, caregiving, all of it every day. So
yeah,
I mean, I'm still in the thick of it. And so I bring the family's perspective from trying to digest all this and navigate all this.
yeah,
And you can too, but you gotta take care of yourself and get the resources that you need.
yeah. Thank you so much, Nicole, for this incredibly important work. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, I hope we, first of all, A, didn't leave you totally depressed. B, that you feel like you have some resources and some ways to be more resilient in the face of this, whether it's your own end of life preparation and getting, sorted and taking care of yourself proactively, please do. Whether it's dealing with someone in your life right now or potentially in the future. I really, really hope you hear that A, you're not alone. B, that there are resources and supports for you available, and you need to ask for them. One of the things we do in our lives is try and go it alone too often. This is not an area where you can go it alone. You just can't. So get support, get Nicole's book, and go to that resource of the say your Instagram again, because I think that's super valuable. The book reviews,
Dementia Book Review.
dementia
Dementia Book Review.
on Instagram. Okay.
On Instagram, yeah.
Brilliant, 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 brilliant. I'm going to talk to you about a way that you turn that into your lead magnet. Um, and so that you can get that out to more people. And reach out for support. If you are not a member of the Maturepreneur world on Facebook community, please join. That's an online community you can be part of where we have conversations that matter. Please do subscribe to this podcast because we talk about everything from how do you create lead magnets so you can build your list, so you can build your business, to dementia and self-care, to the spiritual side of life, to how to, create publicity and everything in between, because we are 55 plus and hashtag not done by a long shot. There is so much more that we have to give and to do, and we need some support and resources for that. So that's what this podcast and my work is dedicated to. So please do connect with me, connect with people like Nicole who can support you at the various stages that you're at, so that you can accelerate whatever it is you're committed to being, doing, and having. We need community. We need connection. I hope I'm preaching to the choir here because I want you to hear me. This is something that is creating 1 in 4 people in Canada and actually in North America currently have mental health issues because of loneliness. So reach out. We need to turn that around. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole. I appreciate you and your heart and your passion and your expertise and all the hard work you've done in this area. I think it's a beautiful way to turn your mess into your message and to really support others in that process. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a blessed week. Please do subscribe and share this episode in particular. More people need to be talking about this. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.